Hello, YouTube, and welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. My name is Kevin Castley, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to hawk pill liberals and left-leaning people. So, in our current and contemporary political discourse, it is the case that most liberals and most left-leaning people are of the persuasion of it's not our business. We shouldn't be the world police. It's no place of the Western cultures to tell other cultures what to do. Well, here's the thing, right? I've talked about this with my friend Reese of Nightmare Fuel on several occasions, on a couple of live streams that we've done. And he and I both agree on this, that there are different tactics and different strategies to pill different people from different political backgrounds to bring them around the same cause. So in other words, it'll be the same end goal, but there are different ways of bringing liberals around to that goal than there are conservatives around to that goal. So my next video will be how to hawk pill conservatives. This one, and of course right-leaning people. This one is focused on liberals and left-leaning people. And I use liberals as more of the social liberal type, right? Like there are obviously some people that are liberal on economics and stuff that, are centrist. They understand foreign policy, but a lot of the people that call themselves liberals in the American sense of the word, they view things like Michael Moore as documentaries. They see them as they see documentaries from Michael Moore and take that without a grain of salt. They watch Oliver Stone. They read Noam Chomsky. They watch Hypocrisy Now. They watch Russia Today. Fascist Russia Today, by the way. Really, just they've only really been exposed to a worldview that appeals to their social liberalism and their sense of empathy towards humanity, but then co-opts it to say, therefore, let's not do anything to save the majority of the world from tin pot despots and Dindu dictators, as Reese calls them. I call them tin pot despots. He calls them Dindu dictators. I like both because the tin pot despot was implied. It implies that, sure, they've got power and everything, but they rule over just a pathetic little weak country that could be much greater if they had a democracy, but, they plunder and pillage and hoard everything for themselves and keep the country stagnant. And the Dindu dictator line, that one, well, what does that mean? That means, Assad, he didn't gas his people. That was just fake news by Jews or whatever. That's what people will allege. The Tanky Tulsi supporters, the Nick Fuentes supporters, the Nicker Fuentes. They'll all say it was fake news by Jews, right? Because they're all anti-Semitic. They're all anti-Semitic. And the dictators, they never did anything wrong. They didn't do nothing wrong. Oh, but here's the thing, right? Here's the thing with all this. When it comes to reaching people that are on the left or are liberal, what do people on the left or liberal in the American sense of the word, and mind you, there is a distinction to be drawn there, because I tend to use liberal in the European sense of the word. I'm an economic liberal, social liberal, all that. In America, liberal and left are kind of intertwined, which is funny because in the rest of the world, leftists hate liberals and liberals hate leftists. But okay, that's just how America is. But here's the thing. They have a different set of normative values than conservatives and right-wingers, by and large. One of the main driving normative values, normative virtues, I should say, normative virtues on the left and on the liberal side is the idea of human rights. It's the idea of human dignity. It's the idea of humanism. And it's the idea of empathy and compassion and giving people a leg up and ultimately helping people out when they're down. This has led to and manifested itself in domestic policy such as the welfare state. It has led to Social Security. It has led to things such as, for example, moves to create a Medicare for All system within America. These are all things that have come out of this idea of a virtue on the left of compassion towards humans and fellow humans as being primary goal, even if it costs us money in the long run. That, in that sense, we can see here that there's that emphasis on doing good to help out your fellow humans, your neighbors, even if it means that you ultimately are holding the economy back. There is a normative virtue that human rights take precedence over the market, that ultimately helping people and ultimately doing good by your fellow man and woman, that trumps everything else. That trumps fiscal policy. A lot of these people are willing to go into debt, big debt, in order to build this sort of social contract in which there is a huge welfare state and a social security apparatus, a safety net as they see it. Now, this, in and of itself, this is a logical sort of thing, right? It makes sense that those institutions would follow from a group that holds that value as a normative virtue, because it's not really a normative virtue on the right. The right sees like individual responsibility as a normative virtue. The right sees economic opportunity, equal opportunity as a normative virtue. The right sees creating favorable market conditions as a normative virtue, which the left either disregards or underplays the importance of. So when we're looking at the left has been co-opted, perverted away from this focus on the idea that we got to help out our fellow human beings to, okay, well, we got to help out our fellow human beings. That's all still there, but let's not do anything about Iraq. Let's not do anything about Afghanistan. Let's not do anything about Rwanda. Let's not do anything about Yugoslavia. Let's not do anything about Eastern Europe. Let's not do anything about North Korea, because that'd be bad. That would be warmongering. So our enemies have done a good job, a really good job, mind you, of branding and co-opting that normative virtue to blatantly disregard anything that's outside of the borders of America, or if you want to be generous, the Western Hemisphere at large. But really, it comes down to America. They've taken a normative virtue that would have led itself to be the most humanist and most interventionist and most hawk-pilled ideology around, to making it be the most insular and the most likely to reject appeals to hawkishness and to intervention. It's a really remarkable job. I've got to hand it to our enemies. They have done a really good job. And a lot of this started with the Vietnam War, where you had these anti-war losers who they claimed to care about human rights and everything. And then they went and sided with the Viet Cong and protested on behalf of the Viet Cong that tortured and massacred the Vietnamese people to establish communism and consolidate communism and created a bloodbath state. I mean, just wow. Just wow. And they argued that not only should America do nothing, America should pull out after America had already committed herself to standing by her ally in South Vietnam. That is degenerate. That is degenerate. That is a betrayal. That is just as bad. It's on the same level as what the Taker-in-Chief Trump did to the Kurds. Absolute betrayal. Absolute degeneracy. And it is a perversion of the normative virtue, of course, because the normative virtue is humanism. But what our enemies have done is that they have twisted and co-opted the left and liberal Americans' normative virtue of humanism into, yeah, but for whites only, for Westerners only, we only want human rights for whites, basically. War bad, all this sort of stuff. They've done a great job, a remarkable job. And we, my friends, the Hawks, the Hawk Gang, we have to do our best to bring these liberals and leftists out from the darkness and show them the light and show them the path that the normative virtues which they hold necessarily imply, but from which they have been led astray by our enemies, in the service of our enemies, in the service of fascism, in the service of totalitarianism, in the service of genocide, in the service of ultimate anti-human consolidation of the most brutal regimes in history. And we witness this with respect to every flashpoint in the world, every one of them. Korea, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Latin America, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can look at the horrendous humanitarian situation unfolding in Venezuela. A situation where it would be very easy, not very costly, to have an American intervention there because it's America's backyard, where there's already established precedent in the Monroe Doctrine that America intervenes in her backyard. And there's a dictator there which is lending territory and bases to, to the enemies of America in the West, to the enemies of NATO. Russia, fascist Russia, is literally able to bring nuclear bombers in there. And they brag about it on Russia Today. It is unbelievable. So this is something that everybody should be able to get around, especially on the left, and say, we need to do something. The Venezuelan people are starving, and their kleptocratic, elitist dictator is robbing them of all the fruits of their labor, right? That's what you would think would happen. But no. They've done a really good job with Russia Today and Telesur and Hypocrisy Now and all these other networks and Al Jazeera and Noam Chomsky and Glenn Greenwald and Abby Martin and all these figures of taking the normative virtue of the left that is good, and it is good. It is inherently good. The idea that we have to protect and that we have to have compassion for our fellow humans, and that, well, that may come at a price. We need to recognize and empathize with our fellow humans. That is a good virtue. You can be right-wing and think that that's a good virtue, but say, but we also need to be practical. That's fair, right? I am that is more or less my persuasion with respect to economics. But you can also be left-wing. You can openly embrace that virtue. But we can all agree that humanism and compassion for our fellow humans, that is a normative virtue, right? There's nothing evil about that. It's just a matter of how do we go about doing it. Well, it's been co-opted into the most disgraceful and degenerate version of that, which is, we only care about ourselves, and that's none of our business. And not only is it none of our business, but if we do anything over there, that's us being white supremacist racists who are trying to force our will on other cultures. And so they'll care a lot about income inequality in America and point to the 1% and say, look at how much they've taken from the country and everything. But when they look at the 1% in Venezuela that's cozy with Maduro, they'll say, yeah, but that's their culture. They just have a culture of income inequality. And if we go in there and try to change it and try to give them humanitarian help and try to give them a democracy, no, that would just be an evil USA imperialism. Well, no. This is a talking point that serves the interests of our enemies, and we have to debunk it. And we have to bring these people to the light, to the hawk side. And I'm not saying make them neoconservatives. Saying make them liberal hawks. Not even make them. I'm sure a lot of them would naturally be liberal hawks if they hadn't been exposed to all the cringy propaganda from Kremlin Kyle Kulinski, neckbeard Jimmy Dore, Abby Martin, Vladimir Putin's Russia Today. I mean, it just goes on and on. Like all these lefty type networks, they're all based in other countries, and they all shill against America, and they all defend the Tin Pot despots. So, of course, the leftists, their friends, everybody, if they want to be cool, if they want to be hip, if they want to get good grades in school, and of course their professors watch these networks, they have to be woke. And what does it mean to be woke? It means, you take that normative virtue that you have and you crush it. And you say, to hell with compassion and to hell with humanism. We see, any efforts at humanism abroad and say, we're bad. We're bad. Because sovereignty has been replaced. They've literally, it's remarkable. It's great propaganda, my friends. It's great propaganda. They have replaced the normative virtue on the left of humanism and compassion for one's fellow species, basically, as they've replaced that with sovereignty. Oh, I mean, they basically turned them into reactionaries. They've turned them into like feudal, divine right of kings type reactionaries from like the 1600s. That's what they've done with the left, to say, oh, I'm for gay rights, and I know that what Putin's doing is really bad for gay rights, but it's not our place to intervene because that would be infringing upon Russian sovereignty. In other words, they've made sovereignty a higher virtue on the left side than humanism and compassion. That is a big yikes. This is a big yikes, my friends. My hot gang, big yikes. And so here's the thing. We have to undo that damage. We have to undo that construct of sovereignty as a normative virtue. Is sovereignty a good thing? Well, it depends. Sovereignty is something that you have to earn. America's earned it. Canada's earned it. The UK has earned it. You earn it by having a social contract which respects and upholds the dignity of your people, which has in place a rule of law, self-determination of the people, a democratic order, an independent judiciary. There are all these things. Not genociding your people, for example. If you violate those things, if you do wars of aggression like Saddam did, if you try to get nukes in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, if you get weapons of mass destruction, if you use weapons of mass destruction, which Saddam did, they'll say, he didn't have WMDs in 2003. Yeah, but he used them in the 1980s, so it's irrelevant. It's like, if I kill somebody, then they come to arrest me, and I say, yeah, but I dumped the gun in a river 2 hours ago, so I'm innocent. It's like, no, you still used the gun to kill somebody. Just because you don't have the gun in your place anymore doesn't mean that you didn't commit the crime. They've taken what would be people that would be intellectual and would have, because let's just keep it real. A lot of the people on the left tend to be more intellectual, even though I disagree with them on a lot of things. They tend to think about things more. And they've taken that intellectual curiosity and they've turned it into bootlickery, into just buying the party line of, oh, well, he didn't have WMDs, so he didn't do nothing wrong. It's like, oh, are you kidding me? He didn't do nothing wrong. Literally. Oh, man, how cringe. Oh, how cringe. It's sad, and it's going to take some work, my friends, but when we try to dismantle that construct of sovereignty as their normative virtue and bring back humanism and intervention as a normative virtue and hawkpill the leftists and liberals, we can't use appeals to national security. We can't use appeals to the economic interest. We can't use appeals to this is good for our allies. It's good for fighting terrorism. We can't do that because it's not in the left's nature to care about those things. In fact, it's in the left's nature to view doing things for economic interests with skepticism as imperialism, that sort of stuff. We have to frame these things in a humanistic context, which is, what Christopher Hitchens did a good job of, for example. We have to do it. Now, those arguments won't convince anybody on the right, and that's fair. And that's why I'm going to have a second video on how to hawkpill people on the right, because they've just as easily been led astray from their initial normative virtues of national security and economic interests and whatnot in order to uphold and bootleg for our enemies, right? We need to bring them into the light as well, but we'll use different arguments for them. When it comes to the liberals, we have to understand who we're talking to whom we're talking. Can't use right-wing arguments to hawkpill a left-winger. You can't use left-wing arguments and appeals to left-wing virtues to hawkpill a right-winger. Leftists have left-wing virtues, rightists have right-wing virtues. They are different. They have fundamental difference. That's why there's a left and a right wing. We need to understand that both can get around the same policy of intervention for different reasons, and that it doesn't matter what your reasons are, because at the end of the day, what matters is that we make the world a better place. And we do both in terms of expanding our national interest and helping out our fellow men and women around the world. And we can do both, and we can do it well. And we need to dismantle the memes that our enemies have constructed to lead astray both the left and right and pit them against each other and make it seem like we're worlds apart, when in reality we do share a lot of common aims. We just have different normative virtues. We have to appeal here to the normative virtues of compassion, of humanism, and solidarity. Honestly, that's one big one on the left is the normative virtue of solidarity. You'll see it all the time from the bread tube types, from Vosh, from even like Noam Chomsky type figures. They'll talk about solidarity, and they'll always use it to justify standing with the most brutal regimes around the world. No, what we need to do is we need to understand that normative virtue there of standing in solidarity with oppressed peoples We need to appeal to that, and we need to change the lens. We need to change the object of solidarity which the left holds right now. The object of solidarity which the left holds at present is they view the object of solidarity as the leaders of the regimes which we want to liberate. We need to change their frame of reference from viewing the object of solidarity as Kim to the object of solidarity being the people that Kim rapes and tortures. That's what we need to do. And I'm convinced, my friends, that we can do it. It's just going to take some work. I have a meme page, Liberal Hawk Memes for Moral Universalist Teens, where I try to hawk pill both leftists and rightists. Meme warfare is important in our efforts, my friends. We have to recognize it. We have to follow through and understand that we're going to have to use different arguments with different people. And we also have to face an unfortunate truth in all this. There's about 20% of people or so, and I don't have hard numbers, but this is just my experience, where when you present them with these arguments and you very, respectfully and make a genuine effort to attempt to show them the light, they will see all the logic behind the light and they will choose darkness. But they will do it in abandoning their cognitive dissonance. And that's how we can tell who our real enemies are. Because right now, there are a lot of people that aren't actually our opponents. They just have been misled. They're just going along with memes because their friends believe it. They've only ever seen Noam Chomsky. They haven't seen an alternative way of viewing the world. They hear liberal hawk and they immediately think bad. They think neocon ghoul or whatever, right? They think of it as a meme. They don't understand that we're real, right? They don't understand that we actually care about humanity. They just see us as a meme. And we need to do some work here. And what we need to understand is that, yeah, some people will reject this. There are people on the left, the tankies, that when presented with all the evidence in the world to show how we need to stand in solidarity, that we need to change the frame of reference from the regime to those oppressed by the regime. Because mind you, with progressives and leftists, that is inherent in their nature to have that as a virtue, to favor the oppressed over the oppressor. So all that we need to do to hawkpill them is just show them who the real oppressor is and who the real oppressed are. Because right now they think that Kim is oppressed by America, when in reality the people of North Korea are oppressed by Kim. That's all the work that we need to do, and we can hawkpill them basically. It'll take more steps, but that's the foundation, if you follow me, my friends. But here's the thing. Some of them will not follow that logic. That they will follow it. They will understand it. They will understand all the logic. They will understand all the arguments. They're not idiots. And they will say that, yes, but Kim has a harmonious system. And, he's done great work at purging the party of degenerate F words and stuff. And they'll say, well, he doesn't have any Jews to deal with in North Korea, or you don't see any Browns coming over to North Korea, or, they have a wall. Why don't we? Those kinds of arguments, those people, you're not going to convince them with appealing to the normative virtues of solidarity, of compassion, of humanism. Because they are not compassionate, they are not humanists, and they don't stand in solidarity. They're leftists, sure. They're Nazbolt types. They are the fringe and cringe. They are people that are, if given the choice between liberalism and fascism, they'll choose fascism because they're closer on the political circle to fascism than they are to liberalism. They're right there at the bottom on the far left side of the circle, kissing around with the far right bottom of the circle. They're miles away from liberalism, from human rights. They view human rights as degenerate. They view human rights as Jewish. Those people, we are never going to convince them, and I have no intention of convincing them. That's not the objective. The objective is to apply a filter here where we weed out those on the left that are not on our side, and we ultimately have the filtrate and the residue. We can see the tankies will reveal themselves as the residue, and at the end of the day, the actual well-meaning liberals and leftists will reveal themselves as the filtrate, and they will come around and they will join the hot gang. And we will all gather around and stand in solidarity with the people who are yearning to be rid of the yoke of their tin pot despot dictators around the world. And this, my friends, this is our aim. It is inherently noble. And it will take some work, but I am convinced that we can do it. And we must do it, because the alternative is the fascists pull everyone to their side, and they continue to construct memes that pervert the normative virtues of solidarity and compassion and humanism, and further corrupt them to support mental gymnastics on behalf of the most brutal regimes in history. And in this, we are waged in a war between good and evil, my friends. And yes, it will take some work, but it is worth fighting for. We are in a meme war. We are in a culture war. We are in the era of cringe. And if we want to come out on this, on the other side, in a better place, poised to make the world a good place to live for everybody, we have to take foundational efforts here to rid people of their cognitive dissonance. We have to filter out the cognitive dissonance. We have to reveal the filtrate of fascism, or I should say the residue of fascism, and the filtrate of liberal interventionism, because those are the only two options at the end of the day. The current system is unsustainable. You cannot hold in your mind the idea of compassion and humanism as normative virtues and then shill for brutal despots around the world. You just cannot have it. It is an unstable system. It's an unstable equilibrium. If we cede our efforts and yield to the fascists, they will in time resolve that cognitive dissonance, and they will bring everyone on the left around to be a tanky. We have to stop that and nip it in the bud. It's not optional. This is something that has to happen, and you're not going to win over anybody who's on this persuasion by appealing to them with arguments of national security or economic interest. They're not interested in it. They at present care about human values, human dignity, human rights. We have to appeal to that. We have to bring them back around to our side, because they used to be here. With Tony Blair, they were around. You saw a lot of liberal interventionists. You saw a lot of people who were outraged about Rwanda. You saw a lot of people who were outraged about what happened in Yugoslavia. But over time, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse, because right now the fascists are doing their best to pill people on the left, or the tankies are doing their best to pill people on the left, and we're just sitting around twiddling our thumbs, all the hawks. They haven't revealed themselves yet. Myself, I have. Reese has. But we're a small community right now. We have to grow, because if we don't grow, they grow. And if they grow, our enemies grow. And as I said, we're engaged in a battle between good and evil. And there are no do-overs, my friends. If we allow evil to prevail, we may never have a second chance. So I hope that you will heed this warning, and that you will take this as a word of advice to perpetuate the cause of liberal intervention and ridding the world of tyrants. So thank you for watching, my friends. Have a good evening.